And how was your Christmas?
Yeah, Christmas was very good. Not as good as it might have been, but I mean, I'm sure everybody had a disrupted Christmas. But we went up to the Gold Coast.
Ooh, how easy was that to get in and out of?
Well, it wouldn't have been if we'd left it any later. But we knew that things were going to be, or could be, a bit tight, so we decided to leave a day early and then go straight through without stopping off at our daughter's place. And because we did that, at midnight that night, the border slammed shut.
Oh, wow.
So we got in without any problem. There were no checks and nothing, and of course the border was open at that time. But some of our children who were coming up for Christmas couldn't make it, coming from Sydney. So look, I'm sure everybody had a very much disrupted Christmas and New Year. I mean, such a shame, but I mean, that was 2020, the year that was. Whether it's going to be any better in 2021, I think remains to be seen. But,
Yeah.
But no, it's very, very sad, but that's the way the modern world is.
Yep. Now, Dr. John, we've had some interesting news over the last few weeks, all sorts of stuff. I saw one story where they say there's mounting evidence that life on Earth started with more than just RNA. And scientists are now saying, no, they believe life started with both RNA and DNA. That's ribonucleic acid and deoxyribo. I can't even say it now. Yeah, it's a big word. But, basically these are little information strands that you've talked to us about before that have literally millions of pages of information in them. And, scientists now saying, hey, voila, it all just started at the same time. What do you know?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons why they suggested that RNA started first is because RNA is a little bit simpler than DNA. But they're very similar. I mean, it sounds, when you talk about RNA, DNA, they're all organic chemical compounds, and they're a compound of a sugar, a phosphate backbone, and also the nucleic acids. And the nucleic acids are pretty similar in both, except for one of them. But the reason why one's called RNA and the other DNA, the sugar is deoxyribose, and in RNA the sugar is ribose. And in organic chemistry, whenever you see the O's at the end, that means it's a sugar, and there are heaps of sugars. I mean, we have glucose and lactose and maltose and sucrose and fructose, all of those things that are sugars, but they're all a little bit different. And there is a slight difference between deoxyribose and ribose, but they're very similar. But they are, as you rightly mentioned, information strands. DNA is double-stranded, RNA is single-stranded, which is why they thought that maybe RNA came first, because it's simpler. But really, they are both enormously complex, and they are information carriers. And in one of the things that they do in particular is they build proteins. And they build proteins in an amazing way. When you see the information strand of all of those long letters, and there can be hundreds of thousands of them in a strand, what you don't see is that it's actually, when you're building proteins, for example, it's a whole string of three-letter words. And each three-letter word is the code for a particular amino acid. And amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. So the strand has the code to tell your body what amino acids to link up in the chain to make the particular protein. Yeah, I mean, the complexity is just astonishing. You know,
which makes it hard to believe that they can actually follow this coronavirus back person by person by looking at the DNA strands.
No, well, in the coronavirus, it's RNA. It's an RNA virus, not a DNA virus. And what they're looking for, I think, is that they're looking at one of the proteins in it called the spike protein, which is the protein that makes it latch on to your cells.
Yep.
And because all of these viruses and bacteria mutate, because they replicate quite quickly, they mutate quite quickly as well.
Mm-hmm.
And a mutation just means a change in one of the nucleic acid nucleotide bases. And so you can examine the sequence and see where there's been a slight change. So that means you can have a look at a virus out of one strand that might occur on the northern beaches and another strain that might occur elsewhere, and see a slight difference and have an idea of where it came from.
But the fact that they can literally follow it person by person and see which one came first is remarkable.
It is, yeah. It's the technology that we do have to follow these things really is fantastic. But look, as we've often said before on this program, the probability of any mutated strains being worse than the original one is not very high, because mutations generally do damage. And one of the things that's interested me is we hear about the new cases that are appearing, but we're not hearing too much about new deaths that are occurring.
No, I only heard yesterday. I saw a story where they were saying that they believe that it's definitely not a worse strain as far as it doesn't make you sicker.
No, it may be more contagious, more infectious, but it's not making people any sicker, as you rightly say.
Yeah.
And that's the tendency with most of them. And in fact, the first question that we got at the end of last year was about the original SARS. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our current coronavirus is another SARS, and the first one was a coronavirus as well. And the difference is SARS just stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, and the first one was called COV-1, and this one's called COV-2. So that was the first question, and we'll talk about that when we come back.
All righty, you're on 94.9 at 17 minutes past 8, and we're with Dr. John. It's 21 minutes past 8, and we're with Dr. John from Creation Ministries International. He's answering your questions on 0401 949 949. Now, Dr. John, one of the questions we had through late last year, we didn't have time to answer it, was in regards to SARS and what happened to it.
Yes, well, that was the original one, Mick, and it was a coronavirus as well. And that's where the name for both the original one and the current one come from. And there are 7, I believe, coronaviruses that infect people. The current coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, is the 7th. 4 of them were common cold type coronaviruses, and the other one were the original SARS and another one called MERS, which was prevalent in the Middle East a bit later on.
Was SARS a lot worse than this current coronavirus? Because I remember I came back from Canada and they suspected, because I got sick, I went into hospital, they put me in quarantine. And, I mean, no one entered the room without wearing a thing that looked like one of those honeybee suits. You know, they were all dressed up with, all literally, nothing would have touched them. I felt pretty freaked out for a couple of days until they realised I didn't have SARS. But they were treating that one like, I was highly contagious, and it was horrid.
Yeah, well, look, it was a very nasty virus. It was quite similar, but there weren't anywhere near as many people infected with it. I think it was only about 8,000 worldwide. Mm-hmm. And I don't know whether we ever got much, if any, in Australia. But it was pretty lethal. I think it had about a 10% death rate, which is pretty high. And also, most of the people who got it were quite sick. 50%, I think, of them needed hospitalisation.
Is it related to this current virus?
The current virus is similar, How much it's related, I don't know that anybody can tell, because we really don't know how they originated. You know, there's a story that's out there, but how much of it you can believe, I really don't know.
There's more than one story out there, actually.
That's right. You know, the original one supposedly originated in civets, which is a little animal a bit about the size of a cat, although it's not a cat. But then this one supposedly might have originated in bats, but you know, who knows? And I think the stories that have been promulgated officially, I don't really believe that they have much actually going for them, and there's a lot of other stories, and I think they've got more going for them than the official party line. But anyway, the original one apparently got people sick very, very quickly, and they say that it got quickly controlled because the contact tracing was done more rapidly because it made people sick quickly. The current one, contact tracing often doesn't happen for quite a while because people have had it for maybe a week or more and haven't been sick with it. Right. But in that week or so, they've been super spreaders. So it's got to lots of different people.
So they're quite contagious even before they know it.
That's right. Oh, well, they're shedding virus, and so it can be picked up by somebody else, but they don't really know they're sick, and some of them don't get sick either. So look, the current one is quite difficult. But the original SARS was in 2002, and it lasted for about 18 months, and then it seems to have disappeared. So really, maybe the same will happen with this one, but this one obviously has infected a much larger number of people. But you really don't know what the story of the origins is all about. I mean, most of us didn't know anything much about the wet markets supposedly in China until this came out. Yep. And it's always been said that most of the new viruses, the new influenza viruses and swine flu and bird flu and so on, they do seem to originate in China. And I remember reading at one time that it's because people and animals live in close proximity, and that may well be true. But again, you can't really be sure of any of the stories that come out of China, because the Chinese Communist Party censors everything that happens and disciplines people who dare to speak out. I mean, the first doctors who spoke out against this particular coronavirus, they were disciplined and told to be quiet. One of them actually died. And only last week there was a story about a lawyer who was sentenced to 4 years jail, and the charge was just amazing. I read it. The charge was picking fights and provoking trouble, right? Because she spoke out against the virus. So that was the charge. And the lawyer who defended her was asked for details of the court case, and said that it was inconvenient to provide any details.
Wow.
That's just Chinese speak for saying there's a gag order on this and we're not talking about it.
Yeah.
So look, when you it's pretty hard to deal with stuff like that when you can never get at the truth, and it's very hard to discover truth these days. There's so much disinformation that comes out, even from official circles, that you simply don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going to happen with this one. I mean, everybody's sweating off on the so-called vaccine that's coming, but really there's a lot of questions about that, I believe, and a lot of danger with it as well.
Well, you say that, you know, most of these viruses, they'll change over time, and those mutations are losing information, so chances are the virus will actually become less and less. Is it less infectious or less chance of actually doing any harm to us?
Less harmful, probably. Most mutations are damaging to any organism, so mutations with this coronavirus will be damaging to it. Doesn't mean that it will necessarily be less infectious, but I would expect that the damage it causes will be less.
So in time, it could become an easier disease to deal with. Yeah, harmless. And can I assume then that maybe our body will build antibodies to a less harmful variant, which will cover all the rest?
I don't know that you can make too many assumptions, Mick. What people are hoping, and this was the idea in Sweden, was that herd immunity would develop. So many people had had it, and they all had antibodies against it, and it wasn't going to be a problem. But whether that didn't really happen in Sweden, so I don't think we know.
Yeah, the numbers have gone a little bit crazy in Europe, and of course, as the death rate keeps climbing, there's probably a lot of people questioning, was herd immunity a good idea? Up front you sort of think, oh yeah, that's a great idea, and of course, when you see people dying, well, you start questioning, okay, that's probably not such a good idea, is it?
No.
So, yeah, let's hope that... I hope that we end up with a new variant that doesn't harm us and gives us antibodies. 23 minutes to 9, and we have Dr. John from Creation Ministries International in the studio. He's answering your questions on 0401 949 949. Now, Dr. John, we had a question from Kevin that he's asked, can you please give us a quick rundown on the different blood types? What are the origins of our different blood types? Is there any biblical explanation or link about each of them?
Yes. Well, I think actually that might be the original question that we had about the blood types, which we talked about a couple of months ago. But we did get another one asking for a little bit more detail about it. And I thought I'd elaborate a little bit more, because the blood groups are part of the genetic diversity of the original creation. Adam and Eve were created with enormous genetic diversity, and clearly God foreknew the fall, but the original creation was meant to be immortal. God knew that it wouldn't happen that way. So humanity must have been designed with all of both those scenarios catered for, immortality or the mortality that came from the fall. And as a result of the fall, we've had a corruption of God's original plan, and we're never going to know even until eternity what might have been had it not happened. But look, built into our genetics are the codes for thousands and thousands of different proteins. We produce about 100,000 different proteins. I mean, it's an enormous number, and we really don't know the function of many of those. We know the function of a few, but of many of them we don't. And our red blood cells have got proteins attached to the surface of them, which cause us problems, but we don't know what they were originally designed to do, and probably still do. But the three main proteins that are on our red blood cells are what we call the A antigen, the B antigen, and the Rh plus antigen. And they only really cause us problems with blood transfusions, but that would never have been apparent before the fall, and if Adam and Eve hadn't sinned. We know about it now. And it's generally believed, the A antigen causes blood group A and the B blood group B, and if you've got both of them, you're AB, and if you don't have any, you're blood group O, and it looks as though blood group O is a mutation of blood group A. So as a result of that, There's also the Rh negative protein as well, which is a combination of about 3 different ones. But look, as a result, people with O negative blood don't have any of these proteins on their surface. And so O negative people are considered universal donors because their blood can be given to anybody without any reactions because they don't have those proteins. And by contrast, people who are AB positive have all the proteins, so they don't react to any of them, so you can give AB negative people any blood at all.
Wow.
Now, obviously, it's not quite that simple, and AB positive people are called universal recipients. O negative people are called universal donors. That doesn't mean you're never going to get any reactions if you, in an emergency, gave O negative blood to anybody, or anybody who's AB positive received any blood, which is why you do pretty careful cross-matching before you give blood to anybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
But by and large, you don't seem to have reactions if AB positive people receive any blood, or only O negative people, O negative blood is given to anybody.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long have we known about this? I mean, is it something that's been going on for generations, hundreds of years, thousands of years? How long have people been giving sort of blood transfusions?
Well, blood transfusions were tried before the blood groups were recognised, and some of them worked pretty well, and some of them caused disasters. And I think it was in the early 1900s that Landsteiner discovered the ABO blood group system, and the same guy about 20 years later discovered the positive-negative system.
Wow.
And the positive-negative system, the main problem that causes is in childbirth. And I think I probably explained that last time, that if a woman is a negative blood group and her husband is a positive blood group, because the positive is dominant, the baby is going to be a positive blood group. Now, in the process of birth, some of the baby's blood seems to get into the maternal circulation, and she produces antibodies against it. Now, it doesn't matter with the first child because the baby's already been born, but when it happens with subsequent pregnancies, then the mother's antibodies get across into the fetal circulation and cause trouble. And that used to be a very, very serious problem, particularly with third and fourth babies who were very, very jaundiced when born, and many died. And they used to have exchange transfusions, and even exchange transfusions in the womb. But because women who are a negative blood group now are given an injection at the time of birth of the baby to mop up any of the baby's blood that might be circulating, then that doesn't seem to be much of a problem now. But it's still a potential problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, you're on 94.9. That was Dr. John from Creation Ministries International. It is 8:45. John in the studio from Creation Ministries International. We've had a very interesting morning. And Dr. John, can I throw from questions from our listeners to a news story that has come in over the last couple of weeks in regards to a star system known as Pleiades, or the Seven Sisters. Apparently everyone knows about it.
Yeah, that's true, Mick. And I read that article, and it came out of the Australian National University in Canberra. And it's interesting because I've often used this example in my talks. But the Pleiades is a group of stars, traditionally 7 of them, but you can only see 6 with the naked eye. And one of the interesting things from a Christian perspective is
this goes back thousands of years. How did they see 7 back then?
Well, that's an interesting story in itself.
Okay, yeah.
But the interesting thing from a Christian point of view is that the Pleiades are mentioned in the Bible. They're mentioned in the book of Job, and they're mentioned in the book of Amos. But all cultures throughout the world know about the Pleiades, and they generally call them 7 something, usually female. And the 7 sisters actually comes from the Greek tradition. Homer in the Iliad and the Odyssey mentions both of them, and there's a legend about them being female. And interestingly enough, the Australian Aborigines also have a story about them, and that's 7 women being chased by a man. And it's amazing that right throughout the world, so many cultures with absolutely no known connection of language recognise this group of stars as 7 when in fact you can only see 6, and they're also female, and the legends are very, very similar.
Yes.
Now, how is it possible that all cultures, or so many cultures throughout the world with no known connection between them, no language connection, see this group of stars and give it a similar name?
Well, I reckon there is a connection. It's the Tower of Babel, and before all the languages got scrambled, they were all talking about the same thing.
Yeah, Mick, you've hit the nail right on the head. That's the logical, common sense explanation for it. That after the flood, when all the people groups were together and they all saw the same stars, they developed stories about the stars, and when their languages were confused, they continued with the same story but in a new language.
Yeah.
Now, the world doesn't have any explanation for that.
Yeah.
And I was just amazed that the guy who spoke about it, this Dr. Tucker from ANU, didn't mention that at all. He said that, suggested that the star group, because you can only see 6 now, and the stories are all about 7, then one of them must have faded over the last 100 million years. But of course, people weren't around 100 million years ago. But also, he said it must be one of the oldest stories known to man. But he didn't give any explanation as to how people of different cultures or language would have the same story.
I just got a text through, and it seems that around the Tower of Babel they may have been driving Subarus, because on the badge, that's Pleiades, the star group, on the Subaru badge.
That's exactly right. And the reason it is because the Japanese name for the Pleiades group is Subaru.
Wow. There you go.
Yeah, another bit of trivia, and I'm glad our listener picked up on that. But yeah, the Japanese call that group Subaru, and that's why the Subaru have got the 6 stars on their logo.
Right, and does that mean, well, 7 women as well, or?
I don't think so. But yeah, interesting that they call it 7 stars, and yet you can only see 6.
Yeah.
So one of them must have faded into obscurity in recent times, because the story can only go back 4,000 years to the Tower of Babel.
Of course, Betelgeuse was fading. It's sort of faded and come back and faded and come back over time, and there's been so many different theories as to why Betelgeuse, which is one of the brightest stars in the sky, has been fading. Some people saying it's about to go supernova, and other people saying, nope, there's just some sort of weird gas cloud in front of it now. So, yeah, when things are so far away, there's a lot of speculation, isn't there? And I mean, who knows? Maybe some gas cloud has just floated in front of one of those stars.
Well, at least we can see those things with our modern telescopes, but the ancients couldn't see that. But my personal view is that after the flood, the stars were much more readily visible. And of course, they didn't have street lighting in those days. So, and look, when you're in a place without any lighting and it's a clear night, the Milky Way and the stars are just fantastic.
Yep.
I can remember seeing them up on the in the Whitsundays from a yacht when there was just no light around and it was a clear night. It's just gorgeous, So the ancients were very familiar with all of these stars. They gave them their names, and those names have persisted in the new languages, which is another absolute confirmation of the truth of biblical history. Amazing that science can't seem to see that, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
When your eyes are open, you can.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Well, the Bible, it just seems righter and righter all the time, doesn't it? Yes. Well, Dr. John, it's pretty much the end of the week, and you're going to be back next week.
I'll be back next week, Mick.
Awesome. It is 5 minutes to 9. That was Dr. John from Creation Ministries International. Thank you, Dr. John. Please, guys, send your questions through for Dr. John for next week. The